You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Well, good morning, Mike. Wow. A real calming screen. Where are we?
We are in Owl Creek in Marshall Park.
Oh, is that nearby where you are?
That's about a quarter of a mile.
Oh,
One
well,
of my walks with the dogs.
And you just take this on your walks?
Sometimes. So
and what was this taken on?
This was done with the Gear 360, but the reason I did it is I wanted to match it with some ambisonic, or is it avsonic audio. And what that is it's a 4-channel spatial audio. And the reason I'm going to talk about that is that I had this product, a Zoom H2N, that I had bought, I don't know, 2 years ago. And they have just updated it so it provides avsonic X, which is a variant of it, files that can be brought in and then added to provide immersion. So if you go out to YouTube with your headset, you'll actually be able to move around. Now it's subtle because I didn't, the sounds engulfs you, and I'll explain a little bit later. But you do get the sense as you move around, the audio changes based upon like this water here. And I'm going to talk a little bit later on how to do this yourself. Now you don't need the H2N, but not only have I created or talked about the water is so soothing.
Calming.
But no, the whole point is using the Zoom H2N, I had to use it separately, but I've also been working on a case for it so that you can mount a Gear 360 right on top of it. And we'll talk about that later, where I'm at with that. And once I get back the first prototype, if it works out okay, I will make the whole thing free, including the STLs, so that anybody can make their own, as well as making it free if you want to order it from Shapeways, so that you can use it yourself. My little give back to the community. So I highly recommend it because the H2N, I think you can get for about $150, $175 now. And it is a 4-microphone array. And I'll talk about that more. But so this was some video that I took. Sadly, I don't have the new views yet. I keep bugging them, the views. Remember, that is that 4K stereo 360 camera. Still trying to get them to get me one. I said I'm willing to pay now, but I don't want to pre-order it because it's already been 3 months since they promised it would be available. So okay. Oh, look, we had a time has stood still for us. Okay, so yeah, where are we at now?
That's pretty awesome, though. And so that's 3D 360 sound.
You didn't hear it here. However, if you bring it into your Daydream, I think Google Cardboard will work as well. And also you can bring the file in directly into this video player, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, for your Oculus or your Gear VR. You can dump the file into it and be able to listen to it with the, as they call it, 3D audio, or what do they call it? No, I can't think of that. No, well, it'll come to me later. But essentially, the difference between this and previous versions of audio is that, you remember audio, if you remember 5.1 speaker arrangements, quad speakers, you have speakers placed in a specific plane, and then that sound is emanating from those audio drivers. With 3D spatial sound, you can have it anywhere, above you, below you, and this is a way of deriving, remember we've talked about it and had interviews with other audio engineers who've created plugins and tools. It fools the ears, meaning just using stereo, into believing that the sound is being positioned from multiple locations. And I said, we're going to get into some tools that are free from Facebook, yay Facebook, that allow you to do this. Okay, however, the main theme of this particular podcast is, are we at the point now that, thank you, Chris, for correcting, Deja Vu, Deja Vu, Deja Vu?
Are we, and what do you mean? Are we are we close to like in virtual reality, you could experience something that you already experienced and it feels like you're having deja vu?
Well, I mean, oh, let me jump to your camera there. Hi, Chris. Didn't even, yeah. So the whole point is, as you just indicated, it's the experience or the phenomena of believing that you've already experienced something. And, you know, there's I guess, a scientific theory now that because the way our minds create their memories, as you know, isn't like a recorder, they're like fragment, that some of these fragments are triggered based upon stimuli. The point is, are we at that point now where if we experience something in the virtual world, like let's say China or the let's say something that you have not experienced before, you get some type of, what do you want to call it? Words aren't coming to me today, but essentially
like an emotional stimulant.
Yeah, there's a novelty is the term that I wanted to use. If you experience novelty for the first time on something, it normally triggers, you know, a memory.
I actually had this happen, Mike. It's funny that you bring this up because actually last week, so I did the workaround through Steam to do the Google Earth VR, which is my favorite app, by the way. And I don't know if we talked about this yet, but a couple weeks ago, put the new Oculus version on. And last week had a chance to, it's pretty much the only VR app I've really been using. I haven't had a chance to do any real VR gaming. But I mean, I have, but only small amount, you know, only like a few minutes here and there. And I don't know, it's still, I don't like to be in the headset for more than like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? That's about my kind of like where I like to, I don't know. It just feels like, I just feel like I'm not really in there. I'm still in the room. But Google Earth VR is absolutely one that I could spend easily over 20 minutes. It's the only app like that. And they have incredible demo material. So I know, have you checked it out?
I have. I checked it out when it first came out. Now they've had some updates since then.
Yeah.
And yes, it is the go-to app. It's free. So if you have an HTC Vive or an Oculus now, I totally recommend it.
So they have this demo content. And one of the demos that I did was, it's called Water. And it takes you to these like really exotic places. And one of the places is this place I've always wanted to go. It's that really famous glacier that's in Peru. I can't remember the name of it right now. But you're like standing at the glacier and it looks and it feels like you're really there. And it's got this really dramatic music. And I just started uncontrollably weeping. I don't know why, but it was like an emotional, like I've always wanted to go there. And it was just so gorgeous and it feels like you're there. And it was just emotionally, it triggered some sort of like stimulant, or it was like some sort of stimuli that triggered an emotion in me, an emotional response. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? And then I had to watch the rest of it. It was just amazing. So highly recommend anyone that has a VR, whatever type it is, go get the Google Earth VR. It's incredible. It'll blow you away.
Highly recommended. Okay, well, let's take a look at, let me jump back to my camera. So there's a couple of articles. Believe it or not, this is old news, 2012, Scientific American did this article, been there, done that, or did I? And it talks about Deja Vu found to originate in similar scenes. Well, we kind of knew that. But the important thing behind this article is it was done through a VR study. So 3D virtual reality depiction of a village called Deja Villa, where Clear Advised is a locale created with the game and Sims to incorporate 128 scenes. So, I'll let you guys read the article, but essentially through his findings, he pretty much said that people had the experience that they had been there before. And so, now remember, this is in 2012. This is before the big heyday that we have now. I think this is at 2012. I don't even think, what is it? The Oculus system was even in its infancy, right? I don't remember when Lucky sent this out, his initial prototype, but I think it was about the same time. But as you know, we've evolved, and even though some people complain that it's expensive, keep everything in reference. Remember, computers were close to $10,000 when they first came out. If you built, in fact, you had the original versions just had lights. So we've come a long way. So I think that's the same thing here. But the whole point is this article, as well as the next one, talks about what is Deja Vu. And again, we're finding that providing these virtual environments and then using that to measure a person's ability to reference another scene if they have some similarity seems to be already something that's being studied. Now, I can't say that I've had anything triggered yet, but I know, as you mentioned, Google Earth, we create these realistic environments, and we do remember this. And if you provide the proper audio stimuli as well as the visuals, now imagine when we add smell to this, olfactory, and because that can also trigger memories and give you something that you may not have experienced before. So once we start applying more, and even tactile, all these things, once we bring these into them, we're going to create a novelty experience that's remembered, and then we're going to file that away, and then something else is going to happen, and we're going to say, gosh, have I been here before? Some of us just say, oh, I remember that in VR, but maybe not. Maybe we'll be very close to that. And again, I haven't experienced it yet, but I think we all have experienced Deja Vu, and or Deja. Now you got me wondering. Deja Vu. Oh, I apologize.
That was the way I learned. I don't know.
Well, viewers out there, if you have a different way of saying it, maybe it's Deja Vu. DJ Vu. I don't know.
Pistachio.
Yeah. Oh, well. So the whole point is, I think this is another interesting area to look into. I think the opportunities there are immense. And as we frequent more things with Google Cardboard, we're going to be building new memories of places that we haven't actually physically located, but we will have visual memories or fragmented memories of these things. And I think this is an important thing to study later on. So in my opinion, yeah, I think it's going to happen. Well, I'll give you my own experiences. As you know, I've been doing the VR home rebuild or remodeling. And so I'm using the VR version of my house and then going out and comparing it to the real. And it really kind of messes with your mind, because as they get closer and closer to looking identical, you kind of get mixed up where you're at. And I had the same experience about 10 years ago. And now, again, this wasn't in VR, but just on a screen, where we were creating or modeling our office. And then I would go to the restroom. I said, hey, I've been there before. But the reality, I hadn't. But there's obviously a lot of pluses there. In the news today, we're going to talk a little about Google I/O, and we're going to be seeing how their Tango system can be utilized for what they were, I can't remember the term they used, but interior GPS. So, you have exterior GPS. Now they're wanting to bring it inside, and Lowe's had this interesting example of that. So you can imagine that we're going to be able to create constructs and be able to walk around, move around, and pretty soon we'll have the holodeck that we've all wanted. Oh, well. So something else that we can talk about today that's coming up is Maker Faire. Yes, 3 hours, 1 minute. I guess that's when they open, right? So today is
Friday,
the day.
Yeah, they have the secret Friday day. It's not a secret, but it's the VIP. Pay a little extra. Go when there's nobody there. It's like being on the fast track on a Disneyland day that there's nobody there.
Yeah, well, I was invited in 2015 not only to be part of a presentation, but also to cover it as all things 3D. So I did get to go in on that day. And yes, it did seem less crowded than when I went on Saturday. But if you are in the California area, mainly the Bay Area, This is supposedly the first and largest Maker Faire. I totally recommend it. And Chris, do you have some news that I'm going to be jealous about?
Yeah, we're going. I'm going all day tomorrow, 10 to 7.
Well, make sure that you bring your phone or your video camera, take some clips for us, and give us a little tour. If I was
Definitely.
smart enough and knew you were going, I'd send you a 360 camera.
Oh,
so
it's
that you
such
would
a
have
day.
it.
It's such a draining day now. Well, Saturday, so I don't know. It's got to be 50,000 people go to this thing now. It's absolutely bonkers how busy it gets in the afternoon, and and there's a lot to see. So my thing is like, it's like a vacation for me. I mean, Maker Faire has become an absolute staple. We go with the nephews; they love it. And I've got some geeky family that they love it, and we go and we just have such a ball. But you're just torn this way and that, and you're trying to keep track of your party, that you're with, because you don't want to lose the kids, and so you're kind of trying to like juggle all that and see everything that there is to see. Luckily, I went 2 days last year, and a lot of the stuff is probably repeat. So, we can probably just go, but there's some really exciting talks I'm really looking forward to. Obviously, Massimo is going to be there, giving the state of the Arduino address, which he does every year. And I just really enjoy sitting in and seeing what they're doing with Arduino, because that's one of those technologies, this obviously sensors and the microcontroller market is one of those exponential markets. It's on an exponential growth curve, and Arduino is definitely always at the forefront of that. The stuff that they did last year.
Speaking of that, obviously
Yeah.
you missed last week, and there was a debacle that I'll talk about a little bit later. But one of the points that I had last week is, you remember we had the interview with the CEO of Arduino. It wasn't the open source version; it was the other one, and geez, can't think of his name right now, and probably don't want to bring it up, but I had an email from the founders of Adafruit, and they wanted us to bring it up and try to get him on the show again, because it appears that he has been using false credentials, and we did an interview with this guy. Well, it is when you identify that you've gone to MIT and you're utilizing this to identify your expertise in technology. And in fact, Wired Magazine, again, we covered it last week. It's also out there on our podcast now, so if you want to listen to the audio of it. But essentially, Wired Magazine did a little spread on it. And I reached out to, I think it's Musto, and to come on our show with Adafruit and kind of talk about this, because it's, I got my own opinions, but if you're utilizing this to identify that you're an expert in technology, and the reality you may not be, and
Or maybe you are.
Well, who knows? But the whole point is, the two Arduinos finally merged in October, and I think that news became available at the New York Maker Faire. And again, obviously, we've got a new Maker Faire, and as we know, Arduino is highly related to Maker Fairs. And I just think it's important to realize that, I don't know his expertise. I've done a little bit of research on him, and identifying that you've gone to MIT and also to a New York technology university, I think it was or getting an MBA from New York. That didn't occur. I mean, what is the purpose of it? How did that get your foot in the door somewhere? And is that a disservice to the Arduino group as a whole? And obviously there are some people that find this disconcerting. So
I've
like
never
I said,
even heard of the guy.
You interviewed him.
We interviewed him?
Yeah, go
I
back
don't
and look.
remember. Dude, we've done so many interviews that
Okay. Well,
to keep them. I mean, pretty much like the ones that stand out. Obviously, there's a few that really stand out, but it's like I have a hard time remembering. Like the first guy we ever interviewed was the Fred guy, the great Fredini. Hopefully, he's at the
Fred call.
But
well, he might be.
the point is every year this company Arduino comes and brings some product like have you looked at this Arduino 101, Mike? Do you have one of these?
Do I
The
have one?
Yeah, the 101.
I do.
Dude,
Yes.
if you take a close look at this thing, because it's the Intel, they partnered with Intel to make this board, right? And it's got a built-in, this is incredible, this Bluetooth antenna that's printed directly on the PCB. I love that they're doing these kinds of things now. So it's actually got a Bluetooth, a BLE, a low energy Bluetooth 4, and it's got a gyro for it'll do motion sensing, so you can like build it in to like a controller, almost like the hand controllers, you know. And it's also got like the Intel kind of, not Curie. I don't think it's a Curie. So anyways, they unveiled this last year. Massimo unveiled this last year, and he also unveiled the Arduino Yun, which I don't have one yet, but I want to get one. The Yun is like an Arduino. It's almost like a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino in one. So it's basically got like an embedded Linux system next to an Arduino. So you can actually over Wi-Fi program through a web console, which is amazing. They have this amazing new, instead of the IDE that you install on your computer, they have a cloud-based IDE. So you can actually have, version control, and you can have your programs live on the cloud, so you don't have to worry about losing them. And you can control your Arduino Yun, or they have like other ones. And I suspect that tomorrow Massimo is going to talk about some new Arduino product, because he's always given the state of Arduino and always talking about the latest, greatest, newest things that Arduino is doing. And yeah, so really looking forward to Massimo's talk tomorrow. They also have some really cool talks. I can tell you some of the ones that I'm probably going to go to. They have one called "How to Fix Ocean Acidification," which, come on, like that's a world-changing deal. They've got seed propagation and flat building for if you're a gardener. They have this whole building that's dedicated to like urban farming. It's amazing. So, and then they have obviously Zeke Kossover's Physics Circus, which he's been a Maker Faire presenter, I think, a few different years, and he gives these amazing talks. You can go check him out on YouTube. And there's just like a million talks going on. So I'm really going to go heavy with talks tomorrow, because I really love sitting down and watching these, or standing and watching these people come and give these talks. And the great part is you don't have to be at Maker Faire to see these. They broadcast them, I think, live on YouTube, and then you can watch them. So I know one of my favorite ones that I think you and I sat in, Mike, was the one that the pilot guy gave. Was that you and I? Or does that mean someone else?
That was, gosh, can't even think of his name. I remember
Cody.
Yes.
Cody and I. Yeah. So
Cody,
him and I sat in and watched.
Sadly, not sadly, I was with my wife. If you remember, she was getting something.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, we missed you there. But yeah, so looking forward to the Maker Faire, and if you're gonna be around the Bay Area, don't bother trying to park close because it's a madhouse. They have this whole Uber system worked out now, where you can there's gonna be a trillion Ubers, and they have this whole rideshare quick path for people that are grabbing Ubers.
Yeah, and they also have
spendy for Uber.
And they also have bus. If you're in one of the hotels, they have shuttles that take you there. Highly recommended. I made the mistake of, I was speaking at Stanford the night before, so then I just drove, and like you said, it took me almost an hour and a half to finally find a place, and then I had this equipment that I was hauling in and had to walk 30 minutes with about 40 pounds of stuff. It was a troubling day. No, actually,
it opens at 10. I always get there at 9 because I'm like one of the kids, and then we get on they have at the back entrance, they have this place where, and it's they have starting gates, and they let them down and they blow a horn and everybody runs in.
Okay. So here's the article.
He may have fabricated
so
this.
The CEO Federico Musta may have fabricated his academic records. Well, the point is, Adafruit has reached out to him. I've reached out to him. He's not talking to anyone. He actually makes the point that, oh, it did say that. Great.
Just disable JavaScript.
No, I want it to work. Here, hang on, I'll be right back. Okay. So, like I mentioned, for those of you who were actually able to catch it live last week, I did bring this up before. I'm still trying to work out the interview with Adafruit, with the founders, and hopefully to be able to get Federico on the show. Oh, Jesus. On the show, and we can kind of talk this out. But the sad thing is he has not responded to two of my requests, nor Adafruit's. The other point is, and they've sent me a lot of links, and I want to save that to the interview, but essentially, they've requested for him to have things removed from different sites that identify his citations, and it's not being done. So, as being a third party in this, but having, obviously a location to voice things, and we have done this in the past, I think, we should bring it out. The fact is that Wired spent some time in this, and then, like I said, this was actually brought out by Adafruit. They're really strongly opinionated about this, and with Maker Faire, the largest one occurring this weekend. And as you said, Chris, Arduino normally presents things. Maybe this is one of the reasons that Adafruit is being strongly vocal on this. Don't know. Hopefully, we're hoping to have that interview this week, but sadly, Federico did not join us. So hopefully, maybe next week, or not. Who knows? But check out the Wired article. I don't, as you said, Chris, what are some credentials? But if the credentials that were falsified allowed him to become CEO of the merged Arduinos, that could be a problem. It's not high-ranking positions that are making a lot of false claims either. So maybe this is the year of falsities. I don't know. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is, speaking of the Russians, actually a good thing about the Russians, we've had, I've done several interviews with people, scientists as well as engineers from Russia, and they have contributed a lot in the 3D industry. And as you can see it in the article behind me, from 3D printing industry, they have created their country's first electron beam metal 3D printer. And the importance of something like this is, they give a good description. 3dyears.org also has a great article. Essentially, FDM works by extruding hot plastic. Well, imagine trying to put a wire through your extruder head. Your hot head. It probably won't work very well because it's not hot enough. So they say the only way that you can create an FDM type printer is to be able to heat up the metal to an extreme temperature, and the electron beam functionality allows that to happen. There is a company called Tomsk Electronic Technologies. Oops, I'm sorry. There's another company, and I don't know if they mentioned it here. It's mentioned in the other article. There's a company that already has a version of this, and I don't think they'll mention it here. But this is the first time it's been created in Russia, and supposedly they have some unique ideas to reduce the cost of it. So we'll have to pay a little bit more attention to this. Have you heard of this before, Chris? Are you familiar with this? Yeah, here it is. What is this? How would you pronounce that?
Sayaki
machine. This is the private space company, and I guess it's being used for Blue Origin. So that's kind of interesting. But the fact is that the Russians are also working on something, means there'll be some competition in there, and we may see this come down. I highly doubt it'll come down to a price range that I can afford, but kind of an interesting process. So again, Chris, have you heard of this?
No, the Sayaki one? No. No, this is the first I've heard.
So you're not familiar with Electron Beam FDM?
Oh,
I thought.
yeah, for sure. That's how they're essentially do electron beam manufacturing. That's how they do the sintering, like in the Renshaw machines, or even the EOSint. I think is an electron beam.
Yeah, I thought it was a laser, but you could be right. It could be an electron beam. But the difference between this, the sintering process, which is a film or a powder of metal, this is an actually extrusion process where they use the electron beam to heat up. And I guess that's what you see in this image behind me is the actual hot end. So, but instead of extruding plastic, you're extruding metal. So the big point is that their technique or their process could make the whole process less expensive, and we could actually see this as more of a commercial success than what we have right now and used in other areas. And here they say it can be used with titanium, tantalum, tungsten, a lot of these materials that require some unique methods in order to shape and mold. I thought that was pretty cool. Oh, well. Okay, let's move on to the next item. Chris, you've got something also in the 3D technology. What is it?
Okay, let's check it out. This is Open AJet. Let's just pull this up. So this is a company that basically designed, and we can pull up my screen if you want, is the AJet was designed as a professional printer for serial production. The main reason was that everyone can afford this printer, and after it became clear that the serial production would be too expensive, I decided to make this printer available as open source. This guy has developed this do-it-yourself open source DLP SLA Resin printer with a huge build volume of 48 millimeter by 20. The biggest version is a 528 millimeter by 297 millimeter by 500 millimeter build envelope. So massive build envelope for a DLP resin printer. And it'll go all the way down from 25 micron to 250 micron in the XY resolution. And it'll go down to 1 micron resolution in the Z resolution. So incredibly high resolution, large build envelope, and it went open source. So the guy is putting the files online, how to build the thing. So if you want to go up, you can click on build an AJet. He's just getting it off the ground, and he's includes the whole software package, and he's got different models that you can click on here, and they are moving the tutorials to their GitHub wiki right now. But it's pretty cool. You can actually go check out, and if anything, it's just a good research project. Like if you just want to read how these things are working, you know, I know our buddy Brad from Santa Barbara, you know, Mike and I both have had experience with the little RP. We've talked about it many times. He goes by the username or handle Goopy Plastic on the forums. Super great guy. He has open sourced his project as well. We've also interviewed, I'm trying to remember his name, the creator of Creator Studio, I think it's called, which is basically one of the leading projects for, it's the leading slice. Steve Hernandez, he's like the father of the SLA DLP movement with his really nice slicing software that's an open source tool. And so, yeah, so anyways, this is just a cool...
Well, keep that in mind when we say open source to the user, it is free. However, bundling it with your own 3D printer, it is not. And we've actually discussed a couple of people who have done that without his permission. So keep that in mind, that you're welcome to use it for your own use, but not to bundle. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, which is 3D in medicine. It looks like we both have, actually, I'm sorry, 3D design, architecture, and engineering, but it has a medical twist to it. You know, this is no surprise to us, Chris, but essentially 3D CAD is becoming extremely important in medicine now for the obvious reasons. This is our article from Machine Design. If you join up, it's free. You can download the PDF and actually get a more better illustrations. But essentially, they talk about using different applications for CAD use and be able to actually create parts to be but
that's a pretty gnarly picture.
Well, but you know, it makes sense that you would use that. But one of the things that CAD is very important is that you can, for instance, take the DICOM or create a 3D model and then form fit your CAD, these SolidWorks, there's a few others, to create the component that wraps or fits in where the original component was, as I showed here as a titanium component that is form fitted. But the important thing is CAD, which is, you know, different than 3D, what do you want to call it, mesh modeling. And we both use that to design products, and Chris, you use that in your service bureau service or SolidWorks, as well as when we've had them on before, and we talked about them at length 2 weeks ago, which is Onshape. And then I talk about Fusion 360 all the time. But essentially using it here, and what's funny is that I actually use Fusion 360 to kind of create a little plug for my wife's skull. But obviously getting it back in, she has I would not trust me. And remember, I also use some tools to make my own fillings for my cavity. But those were more mesh tools. But using these CAD tools, they're showing here in this diagram here, where we're seeing innovations. This basically tells you the number of deaths. Great. Deaths per 100,000, as you're probably already aware of, heart disease and cancer being the leading ones. But here they're showing how, you know, once you create a mesh, you can then take the 3D models, and then from the 3D models, you can make CAD constructs of valves and so forth. And then, as we know, fabricate them. And so they're seeing a huge need for here is using 3D training tools. Again, we've covered a lot of this, but more from the mesh modeling tools in DICOM and not actually how we can apply this using CAD tools. And so about it. And how they're being applied here, we have a surgeon practicing a process that we just saw above in order to improve their skills before actually providing the surgery. I'm all for that, you know. Oh, I've never done this before, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express.
Yeah, no, pre-op planning. I'm doing all kinds. I have all kinds of bones back here. I've been printing all week. These large.
Really?
Yeah, like I work real closely with. Yeah, you want me to grab one? Hold on.
I do. Yeah. So, you know, for those of you who may be new to the show, one of the things that we've covered extensively is the use of both MRIs and CTs in order to derive 3D information. And look at that. So Chris,
these are bones. These are bones. These are like leg bones for the hind region of a dog, and so I work real closely with like a top surgeon, a top veterinary surgeon locally. I print a lot. I've actually been printing quite a few bone models for him, and
we talked about this in the past. So
yeah, and he's actually teaching a seminar here to other surgeons because he is like a firm believer in this. They actually flew him to Geneva, and he gave a talk about this. But I'm doing sets for an actual lab course that he's teaching coming up in August here in Rio Grande, and he's just doing a lab with I think it's 8 students, and they do it in pairs. So there's 4 sets of bone models. And there's 4 different sets of models for them to do. And basically the idea is you know, so pre-op planning, like you're showing in this article, when you're doing it, any doctor's doing a study, they do, or the night before they do, or before they do the surgery, a planned surgery, right? Where they're going to where they have time. It's not a trauma surgery where they're just going in and they're just trying to, it's like they're doing discovery and just trying to basically stop the bleeding or something. It's not a trauma surgery, but like a planned surgery, they do a pre-op study. So you would hope, you know, but doctors, they sit down, they have pictures, reference imagery, typically of like the person they're doing surgery on or the animal they're doing surgery on, and they're studying their book to make sure, okay, I'm not going to hit any veins. This is where I want to make my incision. This is, and then they also want to lay out what tools they're going to need. So they got to lay out their tools because they have, I can't remember what their helper person is, what they call that person in the OR, right? So the surgeon is standing there and they've got a helper person that's handing them tools that's like their assistant.
Yeah, it's an OR, what do they call it? Where we actually, remember I did a little VR thing that had one of those tell their audience, hi, this is what I do. Surgical assistant.
Yeah, just a surgical assistant. Okay, so what's crazy about these bone models, so these are from like a deformed animal. This is what Dr. Bob Sykes, he's the one that works in AG. These are who I build these for. And he works on a lot of animals that are either injured, obviously, or they have some sort of deformation that needs to be corrected through corrective surgery. And so what he does now with the pre-op plan, so they use these bone jigs, right, to do a correction. Like they're going to have to saw through the bone and then join it back together. And typically what they do is they use he has all these specialty jigs, and they're at all these different compound angles. And depending on usually in the old days, what he'd do is he'd take the x-rays, try to figure out maybe one of 4 jigs that he might use, and he'd have 4 different ones, but then he'd open the animal and then he'd figure out which jig he actually needs to use while the animal's open. Now what he can do is he can cut these plastic bone models because they behave exactly like bone. The ABS works like bone. He loves it. And he can actually figure out exactly what jigs he needs to use before he goes in the OR. So it makes his pre-op planning a lot more effective, and he can figure out a lot more. So it's actually it's been a really tremendous tool for him. And so he's teaching it to kind of like the up and coming vets. And I think we're going to see a lot more 3D printing in the veterinary and medical field.
Well, we're already seeing that. And you know what's so funny, Chris, is that we were at the beginning of it. And actually, I had my hand a little bit in it. But you know, I remember when you came to me and what type of tools I was using in order to fabricate my wife Siobhan's skull. And it's funny where that has taken us. And obviously, I'd love to have this gentleman on, this surgeon, so that he can talk about his experience with you. So maybe let's do an interview, or you can come in on a Friday.
Yeah, I'll talk to him about it. He may or may not be, but yeah.
Give me his email. I'll persuade him. Okay, well, something else in there. You know, we talked several, I mean, it's been almost 3 years, but we've talked about Enable almost from day one. Maker Faire is a good place. They always had a booth in the past there. They were at Stanford's when they did their little MedX. They tried to do a maker thing in 2015 as well. So I thought it was great. I watched Google I/O's keynote on, what was it, Wednesday. And so I was a little surprised to see this. So I'm going to go ahead and play the clip from their Google I/O. Did you see this already, Chris?
I haven't. I've just read about it.
It, as you talked about, it was a little emotional.
With a colleague for over a year to build an affordable 3D printed prosthesis that would enable him to go back to work. They then applied this technology for a young boy who was born without any fingers. So inspired by this video, the professor posted a single comment on the video asking for volunteers with 3D printers to help print affordable prostheses. The network has since grown into a community of over 6,000 people who have designed, printed, and distributed these prosthetics to children in over 50 countries. So today, thousands of children have regained the ability to walk, touch, play, and all because of the one video, one comment, and that incredible YouTube community that formed to help. And that's just one example of the many passionate communities that are coming together on YouTube around video. So the third feature of this new medium is that video works on demand on any screen. Over 60% of our watch time now comes from mobile devices. But actually, our fastest growing screen isn't the one in your pocket.
Okay, well, that's about it. We don't need to watch any more of that. But you know, as you know, we've talked about. Gosh, now I've already forgotten his name. The guy that founded Enable, and we've talked to him a couple of times. I've actually met him in person when I was at South by Southwest in 2015, as well as at one of the other. There's been a couple of other members that I saw at Stanford. I mean, this is a huge program, and we've actually had Autodesk, some 3D print, as they call them, scientists involved in creating versions of the claw and other things. So if you're not familiar with them, let me bring up their website real quick. But the cool thing that's not identified there is later on in the enabling the future. So if you're not familiar with it, head out there. They can always accept donations. And if you have a 3D printer and it's kind of collecting dust right now, you know, this is something maybe to get involved with your kids and, you know, help create some of these things. Everybody can pitch into it. I have, Chris has. In fact, I remember when you created your first articulated hand and showed it off to us using a pliable material. So here's their website. It's enablingthefuture.org, and I totally recommend going out there and learning more about that if you're not into 3D fabrication and want something useful to do with it besides making little trinkets. This is a great opportunity. The devices are available to download and to print out. The other point I wanted to make is that in the Google I/O later on, I guess they were still with the YouTube thing, and I thought it was really a huge sales pitch, but they did a cool thing. They did a slow motion. I guess you've heard of the slow-mo guys, something, I don't know, I've never heard of them, but they take slow motion captures of things. Well, they were bombarded with 500 balloons, and then at the end of it, I guess they put in $500 that was matched by 1,000 times. So what does that come out to? 1,000? I think it was 1,000. So 1,000 times 500. How much is that?
500,000.
So I think 500,000, if I remember correctly. It was either 50 or 500,000. Regardless, a large sum of money they donated after that event. So I thought that was extremely cool on Google's part. And so if you're not familiar with them, you know, you just saw the video, go out there and be a part of it. Join their Facebook, Google+. They've always got some cool stuff out there. And I'm glad that we were part of it when they all got started. Okay, so let's move on. What else do we have going on? Scanner Darkly.
Okay. Yeah. Cutting edge 3D scanner. Will digitize you more realistically than ever before. This is a new 3D scanner from a new company called Fraunhofer.
Yeah, I think, did I cover that on the show last week?
I'm not sure.
I think this is more of a research company. Is that an actual product?
They're saying it is in this article, at least that it might be, but it employs near-infrared patterns instead of your typical laser. And apparently it can get like 1,000 times the resolution of the current the current 3D scanners from face on. So this could be like the new Kinect. And this is what the little thing looks like. And I read
Oh, Chris, you're kind of dying out on me. All right, Chris, I don't know what happened to you, but your screen froze, so I'm going to drop back to mine, and I'll cover my scanner item, and then if you pop back in, we'll move back in. But essentially, mine's more of a more lighthearted thing, but essentially there's a UK automotive expert who is using a novel approach to do research. Chris, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Sorry, you kind of...
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was done.
Okay. Sorry about that. You kind of froze there for a moment. Okay. So essentially, this guy restores vehicles, but he's taken a novel approach. And I can't say that I'm surprised because about 3 years ago, I had somebody approach me to scan components for Cal Poly to create a motorcycle components. And also another guy who was restoring his own little vehicle and needed parts because he couldn't get them anymore. So the whole point is that they're able to, and this guy scanned all the components of this Ferrari, 1952 Ferrari, as you can see here. The scanner he used is a Faire Focus 3D scanner, or actually a Faire arm, as well as there's another thing that he used, the Handy Scan 700, to create all these components for the vehicle. And he used that as well as SolidWorks. Now, we both have tried to take mesh information and convert it to CAD components, and it's a laborious process. This Ferro arm is pretty cool. It's kind of expensive. Essentially, it's an articulated arm that is precise enough to know exactly where it's in 3D space, and you literally touch it on different points on the object. And to me, that seems almost the route to go, because a lot of times you don't need a lot of a high mesh information. You just need key points. Like that's if you're creating a cylinder, you only need certain points on that cylinder. You don't need all the mesh information. Using a combination of those two, obviously certain things he probably couldn't bring in. I think there's a limitation on the Ferro arm, if I remember correctly. So he used the Handy Scan to scan in the others, and then Geomagic Design X, which is, you don't have that application, right?
No, Geomagic, no, not yet. Well, probably one of these days, but the seat price is so high on it.
Oh, it is. It's expensive, but it's one of the main applications if you want to convert from mesh information to a CAD model. So here we go. He talks about creating the pistons here, and then some other components. But who else did we have on there? There's some other scanners that. Who's the late night host who's also a big car fanatic?
Jay Leno.
Jay Leno. He's had several videos you can find on YouTube where he's done similar things. And it just makes a lot of sense because a lot of parts you can't buy anymore. So if you have a broken component, you can scan them and then combine them virtually or within your computer to create a component. And then you can strengthen it. Let's say there may have been some design issues. You can remodel it so those design issues no longer exist, and then you can cast them in newer materials that have higher strength and other properties that might be more beneficial. And we're seeing that a lot. So I just thought that was a kind of a cool idea. They literally scanned every component of this Ferrari. Does it say how long it took them? 3 to 5 years, maybe, or he's talking about the time. So it doesn't really say, I don't think. But hats off to 3Ders.org, 3Ders.org for another great article. 4 days of the initial scan. Funny. So there you go. So if you've got a relic, something,
and you need parts.
Yeah. Now I was thinking, I think I mentioned in the show, is creating something called the virtual parts bin. So essentially, if you had CAD files, you could just put them out there. And obviously, I've gotten distracted with a lot of other projects, but I still think it's a great idea. So you literally, if you needed a part for a particular vehicle, you can look it up, like a J.C. Whitney catalog for virtual parts, and then be able to download them and then have them printed from somebody. So, okay, well, let's get into the virtual world. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so Chris, you want to talk a little about something I'm going to talk a little bit about, and that's Google I/O. They brought up a lot of things, but go ahead and grab your item first.
So they gave a glimpse of this HTC's standalone Vive headset. So it's not a phone, but it's powered by Google Daydream, and it's launching apparently later this year. So it's actually a standalone headset, and they just teased it and said no phone, no PC. It's a standalone headset, and it's coming later this year, and they just kind of teased it. They didn't really talk about it too much, but There's just these images of it, and you can watch the whole talk over here. We'll link to it in the show notes. But yeah, I think it's kind of cool. You know,
I can give you a little bit more information on that. Obviously, that's something that I have been very interested in. Qualcomm seems to be the main leader behind the reference design based upon the, I can't remember, the Snapdragon 835. So it's the latest version. They released, or I never even got to see it or order it, but supposedly they had a reference design using the 821. That I don't know if it ever came out, but some people think that when they looked at the interior of this, at least a prototype that was made, it was very similar to that build. And these versions from the HTC Vive, did you mention also Lenovo is also going to have one?
No, I didn't even know that.
Okay, so supposedly these two companies later in the year, essentially, instead of it being a phone, it's going to be specifically all the guts of a phone. Built into a headset with this world positioning tracking system, which is very intriguing because also something that was identified that I mentioned last week was the ability for Windows with their mixed reality headsets, which I went ahead and ordered one for $300 that includes basically the tracking system from the HoloLens inside these headsets. So I'm really excited about that. Hopefully I can get it earlier than August. But looking forward to that because I've been making a little belt, as I call it, the Nook belt system, which is essentially a Nook and a battery system for a belt that you can then attach to one of these headsets and walk around. And with the positional tracking from both this unit as well as the mixed reality, you won't need those little cameras or those light towers. You'll be able to walk around. And some people saying that both versions seem to work pretty well. So I'm really excited about that. I wish there were some doors I could knock on. I guess I could have paid a lot of money to Google I/O and seen it for myself. But the thing that I noticed, and the reason I'm trying to bring up this other video, so what I noticed is that they showed it, but it was like illustrations. It really wasn't much that they had. They didn't have anything to show. They had a prototype that they showed to some of the journalists, but they didn't really have anything for like on stage live that you could put your hands on. Now they say it's going to be later on this year, but if you didn't even actually have a beta version out on stage, I'm a little curious, and I'm thinking this is just my opinion, because the Microsoft mixed reality is so close. They already have a price. You can pre-order it as a developer, and they expect to have that by the end of the year. I think Google was scrambling to make sure that they announced it, that they would have their own standalone version. And who knows what Apple's going. Everybody's saying that Apple's going to have something. I hate to identify Apple and bringing something out because, why? They don't have anything.
Can I just touch on this for a second? Because we talked about the Google VR. Okay, you've done the Google VR, right, Mike?
Daydream. In fact, I have a headset called the Dream Treader that has better.
Go into Google VR.
Optics.
Google Earth VR. Go into Google Earth VR, and go check out Apple's new campus, the Ring thing they're building. It is like it's a little creepy, man. I'll be honest. Like the stuff going on, you can tell there's definitely some. They're like building you can see like they're building this silo thing into the ground, like that's not part of the ring. There's the ring, and then they have you can tell there's maybe some skunkworks type thing that they're building like a silo where people are building stuff underground. Clearly that's going on. You can see that on Google Earth. And
it's actually an orbital space station. They've got this anti-grav that they've received from some aliens. No, I'm just kidding. No,
but it's crazy. That was one of the ones that you should definitely, if you're going to go into Google Earth VR, go check out the Apple campus. It's a trip to look at it and be able to kind of see it in 3D because they have it all in 3D. And there's they've got crazy cranes going on. It's fun. It's cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump to my camera and stop real quick. this was also shown at Google I/O, and it's called Google's Seurat. I hope I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but I'll get to the name in a moment. But remember, we've had some videos before from ILM-FX. They seem to have the cutting edge of everything. Google reached out to them to show them some new algorithms, and I'm assuming an API that allows them to essentially render extremely detailed scenes. And on that note, I'm just going to play this in the background here so that you can see for yourself.
ILM X Lab's mission is really to create immersive, premium, story-based entertainment experiences. And our goal is for people to step inside the worlds of our stories, and in this case, into the world of Star Wars.
When there are events, locations, characters, something that has to be fabricated, they turn to visual effects to create that imagery.
The depth of the world that we would like you to step into is as thoughtful and creative and exacting as anything we might put in our films.
This new technology from Google is enabling us to do something we've been trying to find for a while. We take high-quality cinematic renders and we can turn them into something that's real-time consumable.
When XLab was approached by Google, they said that they could take our ILM renders and make them run in real time on a VR phone. Turns out it's true.
You can have very dense, complex scenes with very sophisticated shading that traditionally can't run in real time on an engine.
When I see people in our demo looking at the floor and going on their hands and knees down to expect the curvature of every little bend and twist, I really think we're onto something.
That potentially opens the door to, you know, cinematic realism in VR.
So, as you saw in that video there, extremely enticing. And imagine having, and since, as you know, Chris, I do some development here, and I've tried to push a lot of faces, polygons to this mobile and have had mixed results. And I am really excited about this because, you know, a lot of times what you're seeing with Daydream and the Gear VR is some very limited, low poly, mesh information. They look more cartoonish, but imagine being able to have photorealistic things like you have on your desktop in a standalone system. And so this was brought out, but it was more like a sneak peek because there really isn't a lot of hard information behind it. Essentially, what they're saying is that you have your 3D model and it creates kind of like these planes. You know, we've kind of talked about this before, but essentially, instead of having the whole 3D mesh available, you only have like sections of it, parts of it. Again, the information is very vague, so I'm not going to really guess at it. But essentially, they can take 50 million triangles and then convert them into 72,000 with the same amount of detail. And if that's the case, that is completely going to change the way we view things in a mobile platform. Imagine playing quality PC-type games on your mobile phone. I mean, that is the direction that they want to go. But again, it's been very vague. Obviously, we just watched a video from ILM-FX on it. I've tried to look up some more information on it and haven't really found anything. But I'm obviously very excited about this because this is something that we've been looking at both in the 360 video area. And I've always thought that in order to create an extremely immersive experience, you have to model it and then present it. But having photorealistic is something that's really difficult to do in the mobile world, even on the desktop per se. So having these new algorithms and available in a mobile form, I think is going to be pretty cool. Imagine what this will do to the architectural world of being able to walk around in a home that doesn't exist, just using your standard Google phone, and hopefully they won't keep it to themselves, and maybe even on iOS. Really looking forward to this. And like I said, don't have any more at this point, but I will update you as time goes on. Well, Chris, let's see. I think that's about it, right? There was one other thing. Did I not have it? I think that's about it. We covered the standalone headsets. Supposedly, when Android O, which is the latest version of Android, comes out, there'll be a version of Daydream 2. Kent Bai had tweeted the other day that he either found out through an interview. If you remember, he's the one that does Voices of VR podcasts. Highly recommended if you're into VR to listen to him. He talks to many developers around the world. But he identified that with Daydream 2, the controller will now allow you to take snapshots while you're in your VR, so you can capture them. That's old news to us who've been using the Oculus and the HTC Vive. You've been able to do that, but now you'll be able to do that in Daydream. Keep little postcards of all the places you visit while you're in the VR world. And really go back to our main theme of today, which is Deja Vu. Now we can have little Deja Vu postcards. Okay, I'm rambling there. So, Chris, what do you have for us in the Print Whisperers? Since you probably have a lot of things in store for us since you were gone last week.
Yeah, so this one's a rather simple little hack that I wanted to share, and it's about multicolor printing. So, have you ever wanted to print something in 2 or more colors on your, FFF printer, but you only have one, like a one nozzle setup? Like most of my printers are just a one nozzle setup. I have the Ultimakers, which are 2 nozzle setups, but most of my printers, like the little spot printers, are just single nozzle setups. And so today I wanted to share a little simple hack of
my mini wife is full color.
Yeah. So, but that was because you printed her. You had her printed on like a Z Corp machine.
I cheated.
Yeah. So this is like a little simple hack to do multicolor printing with your current setup with a little Cura hack. And so I'll show you here. Let me just I'll bring up Onshape and show you a little project. I had a client who's been working. He has a company and he wanted his emblem on. He does van modifications for these Sprinter vans, and so this is like his logo. And I just made basically a logo. The black here is this. So this is on black, like a black panel of the car, and I just made these little bridges that connect the letters so you don't have to assemble it. So this is actually ends up getting printed as one solid piece. All these parts are actually joined together. So Onshape's really handy because you can actually export this, and you can as long as you leave this unchecked as individual files, this will export this as an STL. And give it a second. There it goes. It exported it as an STL. And let's see if I can bring up my Cura. So then I'll load that model in to Cura. This is an older version of Cura. This is like the Lulzbot branded Cura that I use for my Lulzbot printers. So as long as you're under full settings here, and I'm under full settings for like my TAS 6 here. And if you click under this plugins tab, so I know that the little bridge features are 2 millimeter. So what I do is I click this little pause at height, and then there's this little button here. And what it does is if I change this pause at height to 2.1, let's say, then what I know will happen is the printer will actually print. So if I switch to layer mode here, and actually I want to go back to turn off support and brim, then what happens is at about here, the printer will actually pause, and then it'll go and park the printer it'll go over here and it'll park the printer around right about here somewhere. And what it does is it actually pauses the printer, and you can swap your spool of material. So like that bottom material, I start the print on black, and then I go back when it pauses, and I swap the material to a gray material, you know, like a light gray material, and then I make sure it extrudes gray, and then I take little tweezers and I clean the head to make sure there's no blobs, and then I pull up Octoprint here, and then right here it'll say restart, and you just click that and it picks up and it prints multicolor. So this is really handy. There's a program called Terrain to STL, and it's really handy for printing 3D maps, so like topology. So you can print, like if you wanted to print your local area as a 3D map, really handy tool. Well, this is really cool because you can actually find out the layer height, you know, using a mesh tool. You could find out, like I use Space Claim to find out the height of the water. So I make the bottom layers blue for water, and then the top layers, you know, another color for land. So you could use any color for that. And so obviously this only works for certain use case scenarios. You can't, because it's only the bottom layers. It's not true multicolor printing, but it is a really easy quick hack, just utilizing what's already built. This plugin's already built into Cura, and it's just right here. And all you got to do is tweak this one little number, and you might have to tweak these head park numbers. If you actually, it has a head move, so it'll go up 5, and it's just a really handy thing, and the results are pretty astonishing. So actually, I think this one might have just finished. I could go pull it off and show you what it looks like while you touch on your last items.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and do that. And I will go ahead and go into mine. So what I want to do is, you know, sadly, the video from last week was cut out, and I'll explain a little bit why. But essentially, when let me jump to my screen here. I had, you know, tomorrow, actually yesterday, last night, Alien Covenant was released. Did you know that, Chris? No, Chris isn't here right now, but so yes, last night, we're going today, but if you remember, the Alien Covenant, I guess, occurs 10 years after Prometheus. Now, I don't know your opinion about Prometheus. I personally, Chris, do you remember the movie Prometheus?
I can't wait to go see this next movie.
Well, we're going to go see it at 1 o'clock and beat all the crowds today. Oh, cool. Let me jump back to your camera there. Hang on. Wow.
So that's what it looks like. Yeah, so, you know, the bottom is black and the top is gray. And these just, you know, these are for like custom logos for the side of his van, you know, because he does these van modifications. And we're going to do some real big ones, I think. So cool. Yeah, it's just a really quick and easy way to do multicolor prints. You can't do every scenario, but it is really good at certain things. So
as long as you have a Z layer differential, you'll be able to use this technique.
Right.
Okay. Very cool. Okay, so back to my point. Last week, Chris, I wanted to do this special. I converted the Prometheus 3D movie that I have. I bought the 3D Blu-ray disc, and I converted it to a projected image on a spherical. A sphere, essentially creating a 360 video. It's in stereo, but one of the things that you'll notice with a lot of 360 stereo 3D type movies is that they use side by side or above or below imaging, but they only work with half the resolution. I wanted the full resolution of the Blu-ray disc, and so I converted 2 channels, left and right, and then using After Effects as well as the other tool called Metal Skybar, I was able to project it and convert it so that it extended past my vision, maybe out to about 120, so that when I looked at it straight on, it basically encompassed my whole field of view, like your own little IMAX theater. So I tweaked it. I feathered the edges a little bit so that it blended into the black background. And sadly, I showed some of that in the YouTube, and 20th Century Fox immediately shut me down. So I started weeding it out, and eventually I messed up and deleted my whole video for last week. Luckily, I still record audio, so I have no video for that. It was sad. And you can't archive it, because normally I can archive these because they essentially locked the whole event, so you can't even download it. So I was not very happy with that. In fact, last week I pretty much said I've had enough with YouTube and Google and all of them. I'm just going to do my own independent thing. Obviously, that didn't last long. I'm still here on YouTube live. But the whole point is, I think the people with money, like the film industry, I think is overreacting. And I think if you're trying to show a cool way of revisiting something, maybe somebody would go out and buy the Blu-ray if they could convert it into a nice, cool, VR experience. Well, I thought it was very cool, but one of the things I wanted to do was create an ambisonic sound field for it. And the disc has 7.1 sound, so I was able to mix that and actually have an ambisonic field that you could have played in YouTube in this demo, but they blocked it. So today, when we started the show, I created another demo based on a little creek that we have nearby using ambisonic. So I'm going to show you how to do this on your own. And on that note, we'll go, first thing you'll need, and this is a free tool from Facebook. It's called Spatial Workstation. You can download it. They have versions for both the Mac and Windows. And let me get where's my mouse? It's lost. I have 3 screens and they're at different positions and I lose my mouse. So what it allows you to do is actually with an Oculus or an HTC Vive, you can then bring it in here, and I'm going to jump to another computer here in a moment to show you how this works. But once you load all this in, they are like VST plugins for your DAW. And if you don't know what a DAW is, it says, what does that mean? Digital Audio Workstation?
Yep, I think so.
Audition sadly does not work. And the reason for it is it does not seem to export all channels. You can export 5.1, but one of the cool things about 360 or this type of audio, spatial audio, is that it can create up to 8 channels. And that means above, below, off to your sides. So literally creating sound all around you. And we're going to get into that in a moment here, how that's actually done. But like I said, this is a free tool. Now, there's some caveats. You need a lot of other tools along with this. And one of them is a DAW. So some of the tools like Cubase tools and a few others are fairly expensive, even though you can get light versions. The one that I found worked the best. And I'm going to jump to that screen here. Where is it? Find the right mouse. Here we go. Is something called Reaper. Kind of an odd name. So I don't know why I'm missing the files. Okay, let's change that. What was the name of the file? I guess I didn't bring it over. Oh, here we go. Okay. So there's a 60-day trial version, but if you're using it for personal, or you can buy this tool for $60. Not a bad price. And it's a full DAW. And what it does is it allows you to bring in the VSTs, which were included with this, and it brings them up. And these VSTs are like control plugins. You have a couple of them. One is the control plugin itself. This is what allows you to control your headset so you can use it to move around. And the other one is the spatializer, which is this little thing here. And I apologize for not having a very large window. So here we go. And the spatializer, now I'm using a B format AmbiX, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, why I'm using this, but I could have converted this. I'm going to go ahead and do it right now. Yeah, it doesn't allow me to do that. Now let's just do stereo. And for whatever reason, it takes a couple of times to switch. Okay, with stereo, you set up basically 2 channels, but you can position them in space. You see that, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
And like I just moved 2, but stereo would probably be on the left-hand side, and then you can go back to 1. And each of these are channel, and you can set up multiple channels. What they suggest is to bring in, like this AmbiX actually has 4 channels, but it handles it differently. I don't know if you noticed the difference. Here I can change the azimuth, elevation, distance, and then you can load a video. Let's see, can I do that here, or do I have to load it from the video viewer? Let me do this real quick. I don't know if this will work because I don't have a headset hooked up, but we'll go out there and try. So let's go out to our folder, and we will go to, where's it at? Video player, and we'll launch the player. And here we can load the file. So you notice it's best to create virtual links to everything so you can bounce back and forth quickly. All right, let's go here. Okay, so let's bring in one of the videos. We'll bring in this one. And then we can either do slave, which slaves it to the DAW, and then we can do standalone. Oops. Then we can display it in desktop or VR, since we don't have a VR headset. But if you had a VR headset, it shows up in your VR headset. So now that I have this up and running, I can go back here. Oops, I'm sorry, I don't have it up and running yet. Oh, now I've lost it. No. There we go. Then we hit open. And if I did everything right, I should get a new video window. There we go. Allow access, and there it is. You notice I had the drivers for HTC Vive, but it's not hooked up. So now I can go over to the control panel, or the spatializer, excuse me. Here we go. And then I can tell it, see how I have different settings? I don't have it here. I need lots of monitors, as you can see. So I can get it from the video, but then I can also say follow head. Well, since I don't have a headset, I'm going to and then I can actually move around like this. And I can change the focus azimuth and elevation for mixed focus manually. And let's see what else I've got here. See if this works. So, but the cool thing is that you can actually hear the results of where you've put your soundtracks. So let's jump back to this soundtrack, which is actually, no, it doesn't allow me to do it. That was bad. Okay, so let's go back to, so this track that I have here is an AmbiX, and the reason it's an AmbiX is that I used, remember I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the H2N from Zoom, which is a cool little device that, actually I'll show my little image. Which is a little device that has basically 4 microphones built in, and in its previous incarnation, it was essentially 4 channels, and it had different sound fields like front and then left and right or back. And you could use this to derive a 5.1 sound field. So if you were creating 5.1 ambient sounds, you could use it for it. Well, they've changed the firmware lately so that you can also do AmbiX for full spherical or 360 audio. And the problem, though, is that the sound fields still only are on a single plane, if that makes any sense. And what I have here is this cage that I've created, as I mentioned already, and it sits inside of it, and then you can put your Gear 360 on top of it, as I show here. And that way you can still capture, but have your audio component below it. And basically record while you're recording your video, and then marry the two in this program that we're looking at here, Reaper. And that's what you see behind me here. And so here's your tracks, and here's the video up here. It's offline, but essentially it's the same video. And then I just laid the track in here. And then with the spatializer, if you notice, I've actually modified it from its defaults. I kind of reoriented it so that the water appears to be coming from in front of you. But I also have these little droplets. Now, I fudged a little bit. I didn't actually have this firmware on my H2N when I originally recorded this video. So I went back and recorded it yesterday, the audio, and then just married the audio to the video last night. So here you go. And then essentially you can change the pitch, and it's kind of cool because you have, like I said, as you move your head, and it's subtle, you change whatever's the focus point of your audio. So like if your main, like if you remember in the beginning of the video, you heard the watering kind of in front of you. But if you, again, was listening to this using YouTube, Daydream, or Google Cardboard headset, you'd be able to change your or position your head and hear that main sound from either your left or right. Or if you move up or down, that sound will change as well. And what's happening is you're modifying the frequency component, the delay, and the attenuation of the signal depending on where you move your head. So some other things that I didn't play with is you could actually set up other channels. So let's say you had, let's say a frog that's chirping, or whatever you would call it. What do you call a frog when it's doing something? Or let's say I had an owl or a bird that's hooting. I could actually place a sound in the fields. You see the video over here? So I could actually, I've only got one track. So let's change it back to, let's change it to 4 tracks. Now I have 4 tracks to play with. So I could change one of my tracks so that the bird is up here. Notice what happens to my little dot. It's off to the left, but also because it has a 3-dimensional perspective, it also has a height. So I can literally put an owl over here, and so that when I look over there, I should see an owl. And if I move my head up, that sounds
crazy.
more intense. And then you can do this up to, how many channels? 8 or 7 channels. So because you have, with this system, 8 altogether that are mixed in the spatial workstation. So once I have these all mixed, and then again, let me go back to what I actually used, which is the AmbiX, which pretty much doesn't have a lot of control, but I could actually add more channels to this. I could break up these 4 AmbiX channels in themselves, or I could have independently recorded 4 tracks off of the H2N, placed them myself in their sound field, and then added condenser mics, let's say remote ones, at different locations. So let's say if you had actual individuals in this scene that are off at a distance. Now remember, in the HTC Vive, and now with an extra camera for your Oculus, you can move around a little bit. So you could literally walk up to an individual, let's say, who's talking, and they would get louder. And if you changed your position, they would, it would depend on left or right ear. So they would have a position in space. And if you had 2 people talking, if you walked up to one person and they turned to you, they would be louder because you're near them. So as you can see, there's a lot of possibilities here, and we're going to probably see much more of this as people create more 360 capabilities. Now keep in mind, in the gaming world, we've already had 360 sound, but we now, through Google and others, I think Oculus has a version, we have spatial sound modules that you can put into your VR experiences that you render. Okay, so let's get done with this. I'm going to go ahead and close this window. So once you're done with this, you then go up to File, and then you hit Render. But before you do so, now I had all this created beforehand, but they do have a template when you go into Workstation specifically for Reaper. Open that up, just modify the soundtracks for whatever your content is. Don't try and do this from scratch. It's a lot faster to do that, but make sure that you highlight the 3D master, then go to File, Render, and then make sure it's at 48,000 if you're using a video track, and then make sure it's on 8 channels. But more importantly, one thing that I found to be a problem is that it defaults to 24-bit. Didn't like that. Make sure you're at 16-bit and then render the file. And it literally creates a file with 8 channels in it. So I could probably do that right now. Let's call it demo. On keyboard. Demo. And then I'll render the file. I guess it didn't like that. Let's delete. Okay, let's see. I may not have this completely set up correctly. All right. Okay. Oh well, I'm not going to waste our time here. There's probably something in my bringing it over to a different laptop. So essentially, once it's set up, and it's pretty easy, make sure your files are set up correctly. It'll render. It doesn't take that long. Like I said, it took maybe 5 minutes for the full Prometheus soundtrack. For this little video, which is 3 minutes, mere seconds. But once you're finished with that, that gives you an audio channel. Then you need to encode it. Well, there's a special tool for that. And let's go back to our folder and just go to the encoder folder and then double click on the encoder. Then you find the file and you can actually encode it directly out to Facebook. So you could send your 360 video to Facebook, or drop down, you can actually create the individual audio tracks, or even YouTube. So it'll do it all here. So then I go and then you have to select your 8 channel, and I should have that already. I think that was the 360 sound. So, oops, wrong. Okay. Video, Owl Creek. So that's the 360. So I loaded that. So it's, again, like I said, it's 8 tracks, but only 4 of them were being used for the AmbiX. And then I can drop in my video, and the video out of the Gear 360 is monoscopic. And then if you're doing Facebook, you can also enable focus. We're not going to do that. And then we can hit encode. Now, I do not know if this will work. And the reason I say that is, and let's call this number 2, is that when I tried this on my other machine, it failed, and it said something about cropping. Now, that may have been, okay, so we're converting the audio. So let's see what happens. It may fail. So what I had to do is use FMMPG, PEG. Are you familiar with that, Chris?
Vaguely, like the codec that you have to install on your computer.
Well, one of the things I didn't get into is that there are 2 things that need to be done with the Audio 360 encoder that I'll go back. You need to have MP4 box, and they give you instructions how to install it, as well as Python, because this is all script driven. But what happened? Yeah, see, oh, it worked. Maybe I had, cool. So now if I go back, I don't know where it went. I have to go find it now. So let's go to video, Owl Creek. And what did I name it? Do you remember? I think that's it here, number 2. So there you go. So now I can upload this directly to Facebook and have it out on my Facebook chat, which I'm going to do a little bit later. Well, that was pleasing. Something actually worked. So there you go.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks so much for
pretty cool,
giving that little tip. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work, flow. Yeah. I wish it was more automatic.
Yeah. Okay, so one more thing. You under options, your preferences, and again, this is fully explained to you if you read all your PDF on everything that I've done here. So find your Python, make sure you load the latest version. I think that's my problem. I don't have the latest version on my other machine. And then the MP4 box, it tells you how to install that as well. Make sure you have those routed. And then as you saw, pretty easy, 3 minutes. I found that encoding a movie length thing, which was 2.3 hours or 2 minutes or 2 hours and 3 minutes. Took a little bit longer, maybe about 5, but overall, using After Effects to reproject it, meaning Prometheus. And let me give you a little demo. If you're interested in trying it out for yourself, I have two things in my link. There's a G Drive link that you can actually download the Prometheus little demo. Also, I put it out on my Vimeo right here. Let me jump to that. Let's see. Let me jump, sorry. There we go. So it's a private, you have to enter the password. So let's get over there. The password is pretty easy. How about uppercase Prometheus? PR uppercase. And then you'll be able to play it. Now the thing about and then see how it's projected. So as you move your head around, even though it's still on a plane, because it's stereo channels, you see this scene here? And I actually can't show them. All right, I gotta remove it, otherwise it'll block my channel again. But what's cool is that all those effects surround you. You're like immersed in it, like your head's inside of it. It's kind of cool. And basically the whole movie, really Scott did a great job using 3D in that movie. So sadly, he didn't apply that to Covenant. But in this movie, if it's done properly, you can create a really interesting experience. So I'm going to apply the same techniques to Tron Legacy, as well as what was the other, Avatar, which have great 3D. And again, try and immerse your body into, so that, you know, you may have a screen, but you have your own little IMAX world. I found that it works a lot better than trying to use some of those apps out there. They don't seem to quite project it, in my opinion, correct. And this allows you to do that and project it properly on a sphere. Now, again, I had to buy a subscription to Adobe After Effects, which is a suite. Many of us already have that. But also, I had to buy a license for Metal Skybox, which I use anyways, to allow me to project 2D objects onto a 360 equirectangular, as we showed there. So that's about it. And we're a little bit past our 11:30 deadline. So I know that was a little bit highbrow techie, but it's well worth it to spend the time with it. Like I said, I will have this out on my Facebook channel, but also that little creek is in the show notes. It's out on our YouTube channel as well. And then if you want the ambisonic version of that Prometheus, you can go out to the link for the G Drive and download it. Again, remember that it's only a demo. I do not have the movie available. Do not plan to make a movie available. Get the tools, make it yourself, go buy the Blu-ray disc. Highly recommend it. It's cool. It's got lots of great specials on it. And from what I heard, Alien Covenant is supposed to be a pretty cool movie. All right, Chris, take us out.
Okay. Thank you to YouTube, Scientific American, Live Sciences, Maker Faire. We'll hopefully see you tomorrow at the Maker Faire. Anybody that's going to be joining me, if you run into me. Yeah, I'll be taking some pictures and video for sure to send over to you, Mike. 3D printing industry, the Open AJet, and Northwestern 3Ders, digital trends, Upload VR, Road to VR, and many more that you can see in the show notes. And thank you to all our wonderful listeners. We will see you next week on All Things 3D.
Bye.